Hello and welcome back to the Sussex Azure User Group podcast. This is probably episode 16 now, I think. We're absolutely rattling through these. Again, I'm joined by Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Jack. How you doing?
Yeah, all right. It's another dark, dingy week in the UK, but we're getting through it, out of lockdown, and me and you are lucky enough to meet up later this week, so I'm looking forward to that. But this week we have a really exciting guest, as we teased last week with April. We're joined again by fellow Brighton alumni, Jon Fancey. So Jon is the PM for Logic Apps, and I've probably made an absolute hash of introducing you, Jon. So I'll let you introduce yourself, but welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys. And thanks, everybody, for joining. Yeah, fellow Brighton alumni. It's funny. It seems like such a long time ago. I look back on, my wife and I lived in Brighton for years and kind of look back on it with fond affection in the summertime rather than the wintertime, obviously, ram-packed. So yeah, hi, I'm Jon. I'm a group program manager. I moved out to Seattle about 5 years ago, and I run our Azure Integration Services team, of which the primary component is Azure Logic Apps, which is our kind of cloud-based serverless workflow engine for connecting to anything and everything to kind of do interesting stuff from, connecting your world together.
And we actually welcomed Jon face-to-face at the user group back in, I had to look it up, September 2019. It feels like a while ago, but I guess it's not that long ago. We've had a lot happen this year, I suppose. But Jon kindly came and presented about Logic Apps and some of the updates, and it's really good to welcome you back, Jon, virtually.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. It does seem like a long time ago as well. Yeah.
Not with beer this time, but yeah, maybe next time. Sorry, Jack, go on.
See, I think tonight we obviously, thinking of when you spoke back in September 2019, Jon, we sort of did a bit of a overview. I think you did a release of, I think it was Swift had just come out. I think you're in the UK for a conference for Swift, and that was all going live, and it sort of felt like this is a bit sort of very new. Nobody really knows this. I'm in the UK for this reason. Let's come along and chat about it to some Azure enthusiasts. But again, since that time, we've had a massive amount of changes in Logic Apps, right? So, since Ignite, there was a great deal of announcements, and I think it'd be really interesting for everybody to understand on the podcast, like what your big changes are, because obviously you've been very much Logic Apps as a product, but I understand that's changed, right? You've almost shifted the architecture quite dramatically.
Yeah, that's a good kind of point to bring up, actually. That last year we did some work with Swift, which is the kind of banking consortium cooperative. Is 10,000 global banks that kind of exchange payment data with one another. Every single bank uses this kind of behind the scenes, so it's kind of commercial rather than retail payments. Moves billions of dollars around, between banks every day. But it's interesting because I would say that there's a relationship between the kind of work that we've done since then and what we were doing at that time, which is really what we were hearing from customers was around kind of wanting VNet connectivity, privacy, being able to run some components on premises to connect to their back end and back office systems in the case of banks, and other requirements like being able to do local development and kind of push to prod, and that production environment can be running anywhere. So what we released a couple of months ago as part of Ignite was a new kind of Logic Apps runtime that actually can run containerized, and we tooled it so you can easily run it on top of Azure Functions. We also enabled it so you can run it as part of Dapper as well, which is our microservices distributed application framework. And now the kind of choices continue to expand, and the customer reaction to this has just been phenomenal. Actually taking something like a workflow engine, which is a very generic concept, and being able to now run that and deploy that anywhere, and all the connectors that it kind of provides, over 400 out of the box, being able to kind of drop that into all these different scenarios, which may not be, naturally kind of integration, but really are just about how do I connect my web front end or the bot, that sits on top of my customer service experience to my back office systems, which may be, legacy, maybe running on premises, maybe hosted somewhere else, and kind of gluing all that together through VNet connectivity now has been a game changer, particularly, I would say, for industries that are highly regulated, and the ones we've really seen a lot of traction over the last few months is banking and healthcare. I think largely because of what's been going on in the world. The healthcare industry, at least in the US, has really been pushing on modernizing a lot of what they've been doing. So it's been great timing, honestly. For the work that we started obviously a while ago last year, to actually get that out in people's hands in preview.
It's an interesting point, actually, because on a previous podcast, Jack and I were talking about the banking world, particularly around the networking side, and new feature of ExpressRoute is being able to VPN encrypt over ExpressRoute. So we're seeing that a lot, and actually with that, VNet integration on Logic Apps, that's going to really tile that stuff together with those networking changes with ExpressRoute.
I take it that's all because you're now running on top of the app service platform, right? So you can run that container inside the app service platform, and it's an app service plan that spins this container and runs, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you can go all the way down to kind of doing it all yourself. But obviously the value proposition here really is you can run it as part of app service. So now you can run web apps, logic apps, and functions kind of together. And actually the integration between logic apps and functions is something we've been improving. So logic apps kind of sits on top of functions. But as you will see shortly, we're doing some work there as well to actually have a more integrated experience there as well, because pretty much every Logic Apps customer uses functions, and having a seamless experience where you can essentially extend Logic Apps with code, bring in existing libraries, that sort of thing is very powerful, right? And being able to kind of extend and enhance it in different ways. So yeah, it's been a natural fit to kind of have those two services working great together with web apps as well as part of app service.
So I take it it's all the same sort of not limitations but features. So like for VNet integration, it's premium app service plans and all the same stack as sort of the app service world. So there's nothing different really, because you're just using that as a platform to run the new version of Logic Apps on as it seems.
That's right. Yeah, I mean that's certainly how it is right now. We are kind of heading towards general availability next year. There will be some additional options, right, in terms of how you kind of run Logic Apps, which we'll be talking about nearer the time. But needless to say, yes, you can run Logic Apps as part of app service, and you'll have some other choices as well. So this is just going to provide different kind of options for the different types of workloads and scenarios you're wanting to deploy. Particularly those kind of things that having that containerized Kubernetes kind of based environments a lot of customers are building out, really speaks to, right? How do you do that? Like you look at this in the context of something like Azure Arc, right, which gives you the ability to be able to deploy to Kubernetes running anywhere. And there's work that we're doing to actually make that kind of deployment and environment enablement possible as well.
That's amazing. I even thinking from a really sort of taking it back just to the fact that it's now VNet enabled, right? And you can now take advantage of that VNet integration. I just come off a call with a customer recently, and they wanted to do some workflow stuff for some billing and like pass some CSVs and stuff like that, and then spit out into another CSV. But they wanted to do some really complex stuff around querying AD and group membership and stuff like that. And I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a function. This is going to be some fairly complicated stuff which the customer isn't potentially ready for and doesn't want to write. But if I told them it was a Logic app, they'd be like, this is easy. I can drag and drop blocks together, and if I have to write the odd bit of code to do something for me, I don't mind that. But not everything is code. So yeah, they're going to be very happy, I'm sure, with the new preview of Logic Apps V2. So something I can get started on pretty soon.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think workflow is one of these kind of interestingly, perennially interesting computer science problems, right? It's been around for decades, and we're seeing a resurgence in interest in workflows for the same old reasons as before, but like at a much larger scale. That they're just very easy to kind of understand what's going on, right? Like you can look at a Logic app that somebody else built and kind of walk through the steps and understand very quickly, compared with looking at 10,000 lines of code, all the different systems it's connecting with, kind of managing those endpoints, making sure you kind of kind of what's going on, because it's often not just about the process implementation itself, it's about the control of that process. It could be mission critical, things may have to complete within seconds, and you want to start raising alerts if it doesn't. And having that kind of observability, manageability on top of it is also a very attractive attribute of workflows. The fact you can decompose them as well into sort of sub processes and things fits very very naturally to these kind of business problems that people are trying to solve. So this has really been our chart of Logic Apps, is like how can we just make it more accessible and more useful in more contexts. And obviously hosting and local development and other kind of developer kind of features, VS Code integration, other things are really kind of the drivers for that, to just make logic apps and workflow a tool that is in a developer toolbox, not just an integration kind of specialist toolbox to kind of connect things together.
Yeah, and somebody that doesn't come from a coding background, the first time I started using logic apps, a few years ago, it was super easy to pick up because it's so visual, like you say. And actually, I do a lot of demos on things like Azure Monitor and Sentinel, and the integration with playbooks, which are linked to logic apps, and the journey from infrastructure individuals that can't write that to hundreds of lines of code to make things happen. They've just picked up logic apps really quickly because it's so intuitive to use with the designer. And also, with the connectors as well. Was it 400 connectors that you're up to now? It's a huge amount. It's really nice to see that that's kind of branched and grown and matured. I guess when you're working with customers, you must see some really interesting use cases and customer deployments and how they've used logic apps in different ways that you and your team might not have even thought would be conceivable. Have you got any examples of how you've seen logic apps used in weird and funky ways?
So yeah, there's a ton. It's probably one of the most popular questions that we get asked is like, what are the common use cases for logic apps? Or is there a customer like me who's kind of already running on logic apps because I'm sort of looking at it and I want to make sure that it kind of meets my requirements? And it's difficult because there's almost no typical customer because everybody comes to logic apps for different reasons initially. To your point, Jack, about kind of AD integration and other things, it's like you can do anything with logic apps. You can do everything from kind of traditional kind of IT ops and provisioning and other things, right? So we introduced something called automation tasks at Ignite as well, which is essentially the ability to do automation of resources in Azure. So maybe you want to start and stop VMs on a schedule, or maybe you want to clean up blob storage over a certain age and these types of things. And that's all powered by logic apps as well. Got nothing to do with integration, if you like, in terms of kind of the big integration with connecting companies together and exchanging data. It's about kind of, automation and kind of management as well, and DevOps, right? Because we have GitHub connectors and Azure, ADO, sorry, Azure kind of automation as well. So you can do anything with it, but as well as these kind of traditional integration scenarios as well. So I would say, we've had some very interesting use cases. Royal Dutch Shell presented with me, I think, a year or two ago, and they were actually using logic apps as part of their security office to do things like anomaly detection of resource access across the company. So they were really attractive because it was a team that was responsible for, security management, who wasn't, traditional developer kind of IT department type activities. But it kind of grew out of that, right? And then we often see this kind of growth of logic apps, exponentially across organizations as they see the value of it for one scenario, and then kind of reapply what they've learned to these other sort of different scenarios as well. But that being said, there are some very common things that people do. Everyone's got lots of applications, lots of systems and services they're connecting together. And often it's about kind of replacing older systems that were doing that have become hard to maintain or even out of support in many cases, and kind of moving those to the cloud. That's very, very common. But also, a lot of customers taking the opportunity to be able to essentially augment existing processes with new capabilities. And the very clear value there is really around things like how do they put things like machine learning models against the data that's flowing through these integration flows, visualize it for analytics and things like Power BI, right? A very, once you have that kind of clarity of an integration kind of pipeline, right, or integration process, you can kind of tap off that data to other things running in the cloud that give you more insights into what's going on. Really taking that management visibility to the next level and giving you kind of business decision insights into what's going on. Not just how many widgets did I sell today, but how is that trending over time? How does that compare with other product lines that I have? And really pushing that into, the things like Synapse and others to really take the power of that data in aggregate. And do really interesting things with it, as well as AI and ML kind of processing as well. So just a ton of things. And I would say, this year has just been weird, right? All up for everybody. But a lot of customers have really embraced the situation they've been in to take advantage of a lot of these capabilities, right? It's been a forcing function in many cases for customers to accelerate their modernization and digitization of a lot of their businesses in terms of how they were doing things before and changing that.
So in terms of what the future looks like, where do you see Logic Apps going from here? And are you able to kind of share any snippets of what the roadmap might look like?
Yeah. I just remember what ADO stands for, by the way. Azure DevOps. mental blocks. So we've got a connector for that as well. But you can kind of edit that back in the right place. So this week we actually got a refresh of the preview that we released at Ignite. We knew it was going to take a few months to get to general availability and have this fully released and supported. And we also knew there was a few things that didn't quite make the cutoff that we had back in September. So this week we will be releasing some pretty significant updates to that preview, and that'll be kind of the last set of significant updates that we make before we get ready to make this GA. So there's a few things here. Hopefully, based on what we've heard from customers during the previews, hopefully some things that are really going to please people. Like what, John? Right? It's like, so for example, for the first time ever, you will actually be able to set breakpoints on your Logic apps. So this is the sort of the start of a feature that we will finish as we get to GA. So you will be able to set a breakpoint on an action, and then have then in the VS Code, and then kind of run it, and then have it break on that action that you set the breakpoint on, examine the in-scope variables and other kind of properties of the workflow that's running, and essentially pause on the breakpoint, and then kind of continue from that breakpoint and debug it, which has been a huge, long-term ask from Logic Apps customers of how we can make kind of debugging and testing easier. And that's one of the new features we're releasing this week. Another one that a lot of customers have asked for improvements on is around the ability to do things like data transformation. So we've always had the features to be able to take things like XML and JSON and convert them to different formats, like converting to and from flat files, converting XML to JSON, converting XML to different formats. The world still kind of runs on XML, so it's a huge kind of set of scenarios. And in Logic Apps, we have this thing called an integration account, which is essentially the capability of doing the mapping and transformation, but also a construct that allows you to kind of upload the maps and kind of manage them and the schemas behind it and everything else. So in this release, we're going to be putting the XML mapping and a liquid transformation, which we also have support for, which is very good for template-based mapping and kind of data merging, if you like, as well as JSON, and putting that in the engine itself with no integration account necessary for that. So integration accounts cost money, so this is actually something that's going to make customers' lives easier, because we're essentially making these features available to everybody without having to go and procure an integration account and have that running as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, like the first time I think I was doing something, a bit of data mapping, I was like, I'm trying to work out how I do this. There's no built-in function. There's no sort of data operation for this. And then I got onto the integration account. I was like, I have no idea what this is, from a complete, non-integration perspective. And yeah, it was like, why have I got to deploy this other resource and link it up? And now that works. So that's great news to make it part of the actual service.
Yep. Now you can just basically author them in VS Code and just put them in the project folder, and we'll kind of deploy it all when you run it. So, yep, absolutely. But that's not all. We got a few other things as well. So officially, some people may have got this working, but officially the release in September was Windows only. Because it was about containerization, being able to run on Docker, and being able to deploy to Kubernetes, if you wanted to do that, obviously kind of Linux and Mac kind of come into scope on this as well. So this release is also going to provide support for both of those as well. So I'm a Mac user, other people are as well. So the great kind of capabilities of being able to run VS Code on your Mac and do local development and then deployment is all enabled with this new drop as well. So you really get a lot more flexibility in terms of the environment you choose, right, to do your local development. One other thing that's kind of interesting is going back to connectors and the fact we have a lot of them. It's one of those things that you never have every single connector that everybody wants, and that's particularly true when customers have their own systems, right, which they built, which we don't even know about. So how can we build a connector? And we've had custom connectors, which is essentially a way of wrapping HTTP-based APIs for customers using OpenAPI to do that. But what if it's not an HTTP-based interface that these systems have? So one of the capabilities we created internal to the engine that we're also now exposing is a new connector framework, extensibility model, so you can build connectors in code and have them deployed to your runtime as well. So you'll be able to create a connector using code, which gives you much more obviously capability than just trying to wrap APIs using an open API to do it. So you can do anything that you can do in code now in a connector and have that connector run natively in the engine. Which is pretty cool. And again, speaking to the developer kind of audience that we're really trying to optimize for here and make more productive, it's going to be a great way of developers being able to extend logic apps in ways we can't even think of right now, using connectors to do that. By writing code and using this new framework.
That's really cool. And will there be a way for people to, contribute back to a GitHub repository or something like that to kind of share what they've been doing if there's a connector that other people could use?
So that is something we are looking at. Yes. Personally, I think that's a great idea. That I really can see, that being very attractive to customers wanting to share connectors and kind of facilitating that, right? Because it's often the case that, and we see this already actually with the open API based ones. We actually have a GitHub repo for those where we've open sourced a lot of this definitions for that. So it's an obvious thing to do to expand that, to use these new code-based connectors as well, and make it easy for people to kind of build and share those as well and create a community around that.
I love that. Yeah, very cool.
And and the last big thing I will talk about, because this is also
if you've got more, John, you can feel free to keep going. We're not going to stop you.
I'm really pleased about this release. It's been awesome. I think the team's just been accelerating in terms of what we've been building, and we're not done even with like the releases this week. We can't wait to get this to general availability and keep building on it. But the last big thing, which I've talked about before, not on your show, but elsewhere, I've kind of alluded to the new designer that we shipped at Ignite, which has a new kind of look and feel, a more compact kind of experience. Logic apps, for some customers, they found it awkward when you had a large flow with lots of boxes, right? It takes up a load of screen real estate. So we compacted that and kind of introduced a slide out to sort of configure each individual step to allow you to see more of what's going on in one go. And we talked about at the time that there was a new layout engine behind it that was powering this. And that is being released this week as well. Now, the first thing you're going to see with this is that the ability to render pretty much any shape and size of logic app is now possible. So there were certain types of logic apps, particularly when you got into kind of crazy parallels and forks and joins, with multiple parallels and forking and joining those, didn't necessarily render great in the designer. Now it is awesome. I mean, we saw a sneak peek of this, and we do weekly demos in the team, a few weeks ago, and I really want to see customers put the craziest logic apps they can together to try this out, because it's beautiful. I mean, just kind of it's gone from being a kind of, well, it kind of looks like a step thing to like a nice graph of like all the actions and the flow of the actions that you see rendered out on the canvas of the designer, to really give you much better clarity on very complex, much more complex workflows as they get more and more complex and longer, and obviously the performance associated with that as well, not degrading. So it's another feature I'm super excited to see go out, and that's one of the ones we'll be building on top of in enabling kind of more capabilities to kind of lay things out how you want them laid out, and kind of dragging and dropping and grouping of actions and other things that we'll be working on next. But the new layout engine really does give for the customers who've looked at Logic Apps and thought, maybe it's great for simple processes, take another look, because you can really create some very complex processes with the new engine and new designer now.
That's amazing to see. Like, even for me and my very basic Logic app, some of mine do get pretty wide, as in I've got one that does quite a lot of few parallel tasks. And on my new 49-inch monitor, not a problem. That's great. But before, that was pretty difficult, and dragging around, or the pop-up box would appear over something that I was trying to look at, and I'd have those general issues, and I'd end up diving into the code to try and change something because it was easier. But that's not always accessible for people who don't want to go into the code. So yes, great news. And even like some simple aesthetic changes, right? I think the boxes are now rounded. Like, even simple little things on the eye just make it look so much more slick, which I think a lot of people are going to be happy to get their hands on. And I think that really leads on to my next question. How do people get access to this, John? How do people start playing with the new stuff that you've just announced?
Well, we will be making an announcement probably around about the time the show goes out. So follow us on Twitter, LogicApps.io. We'll be doing some demos later in the week as well, to kind of get people up to speed on the new features and how you can get hold of the bits. So I'd say watch this space, and we'll send an aka.ms link out there so you can point to the bits, download them, install them, and run them.
Fantastic. Yeah, look forward to it. And I take it, is there a Logic Apps Live coming soon? Because I see you and the team are pretty hot on those in the recent months since lockdown.
So there is. We've actually got two. We've actually got two webcasts this week, as well as this one. So this is kind of three. So we've got a Logic Apps Live on Thursday morning Pacific time, so kind of early evening in Europe. And we're going to go kind of deep diving on all the new features and capabilities in that. But we've also got another webcast tomorrow, because what we're seeing is a huge interest from Bizzle customers as well. So we're doing a webcast tomorrow to kind of, as part of our community kind of calls on that, which we're going to do monthly. We did the first one literally a month ago, to kind of launching the new migration tooling that we built. To enable Bizzle customers to kind of migrate to this as well. There's been a huge amount of interest for all the reasons I kind of mentioned earlier about customers just desire to kind of migrate and modernize to the cloud. And we're doing a deep dive on that tomorrow as well, in terms of what we're doing there in the migration tooling as well. So yes, but Thursday is the main event for the Logic Apps Live, where we're going to have the whole team kind of presenting and doing as many demos as we can pack into 45 minutes.
Sounds good. I'll make sure I get a slot in my calendar to be there.
Cool.
So I think, we've talking a lot about features and products and roadmaps. It'd be great to get a bit of an insight, John, into sort of how it works behind the scenes with the team, as in, what have you seen, like, how you've obviously been going on a GA journey for version 2 of your product during a time when you've not been sitting next to each other in an office. Any tips, any sort of inside knowledge you can share? Like, has it been good? Has it been more productive? Have you had challenges as a team? All these sort of things. It'd be great to get sort of a bit of a behind the scenes view on the Logic Apps deployment.
Yeah, it's been interesting. But obviously, most of the team are still based in the same town, right? We just don't get together anymore, other than like this, kind of virtually. So it's like everything. I'm sure everyone kind of can relate to this. Some things are easier and some things are harder, right? We actually set the direction for what we've been executing on this year, last year. So it's been kind of hasn't been too disruptive from that point of view, because we had a very kind of clear charter in terms of what we were doing, and that runs all the way through into next year as well in terms of what we're working on. And right now we kind of do them to give you a kind of glimpse of how we kind of do our planning, which is kind of the short range planning, if you like, is we kind of divide the year into 2 semesters. January to June and July to December. So we're just heading into the next semester, which are based on periodic table elements. We've kind of marched through their atomic weights. So we're on Cobalt next. So we're already kind of planning in all the work we're doing the first half of next year. And this isn't just about kind of everything we've got going to general availability. There's a bunch of other things we're working on as well as part of this. I'll say that one very common customer question right now, understandably, is like, well, I'm already using Logic Apps. Kind of how do I kind of move from A to B, right? Because we have Logic Apps, which is a serverless kind of workflow engine integration capability, right? And this new kind of engine hosting model is kind of, if you like, compute based, where you can provision, you can do an app service, yes, but essentially you're running VM calls now, kind of to deploy your workflows to them. So it's kind of a different kind of model, and obviously you pay for it in a different way because you don't pay per action execution anymore. You pay for the cores that you're provisioning to run these workloads on, and obviously you can auto scale it up and down as well. So customers are kind of asking, like, what does that look like, right? So what the good news, if you like, is that nothing's going to go away here. We're going to continue to have the serverless model and the compute containerized based model, right? So what we're doing is actually enabling all the features we have in the new runtime to plat those underneath the current serverless offering as well. That's really kind of, as you can imagine, a bunch of work that we'll be doing next year. And we think we'll get most of that done in the first half of the year, at least to kind of get some kind of preview out for that. Give customers a seamless transition, because obviously, everybody wants a new design, or everybody wants new capabilities. And honestly, what we want to get to is, developers not even need to make the decision on where a workflow is going to be running at development time, right? You may not even know. It's like, is this going to run? It's not just about which region it's going to run in, but is this going to run on premises, or is part of this process going to run there? Is it part of it going to run somewhere else? Or is it going to run in Azure, right? And actually, being able to start development in VS Code, continue it in the portal, or vice versa, and move from serverless to kind of compute-based is something we think is, very flexible for customers to kind of to be able to make those choices later when they know more, right? So that's really, in terms of what the team's doing, what we're kind of driving hard on, as well as kind of getting to GA next year. Along with a bunch of other things which we can talk about next time. But I think it's been great in terms of the team kind of pulling together, and this kind of goes for I think that the whole sort of product group ecosystem which we're in here, that there's almost been more effort and more collaboration, because it's harder to do now. So there's more focus on getting better at it when people are essentially working remote. To make sure we don't lose momentum, and we just keep going at the same pace that everyone's expecting us to. Our customers don't want us to slow down, right, in terms of the new capabilities that we provide to them, and a lot of the other things that we really focus on as a team, like things like ease of use and productivity, are kind of critical kind of capabilities that everybody just wants to see constantly improving, right? And that goes for us in terms of the way we operate as well. So challenging times. Yes, but like everybody, we're making the best of it, and obviously making changes to the way we work to kind of optimize for the current situation as well.
Oh, awesome to hear. It's really interesting to get those insights behind the team, and especially that semester planning for you're already thinking about what you're going to be delivering by the end of June next year is phenomenal. That outlook and on terms of prioritizing and getting things, this has to happen, then this has to happen, and trying to work out what takes priority is just fascinating. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate that, you've probably got things on the radar for next year and the year after that potentially, because they're just long burning tasks. And we really do plan like that. It's not just a lot of people have asked this month for this, so we'll go and develop it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, product management it's essentially always this synthesis of the immediacy of customer requests, right? Like, there's a lot of short-term things we need to take account of, which is that a customer's running, using our services today, and they've got things that they need, right? Maybe there's gaps, maybe there's issues, maybe there's something else that they need to be successful to bring another workload to the platform. And that's usually what a lot of the semester focus goes into, right? There's also a huge focus on reliability and quality, to just make sure that as we introduce new capabilities, that we're not degrading anything, right? So that's really, often the focus of the kind of semester-based planning is to make sure, we're running product teams with very good hygiene, right? That with these additive capabilities. And then there's this kind of longer term thing where we look at the industry, we look at the trends, we look at what customers are doing in the large, right? And containerization is clearly one of the themes there, right? That's been, not just emerging, but it's been around for years now. But what we're seeing is just the expectation that everything is containerizable, right? Even though we've kind of, before this, it was kind of like, well, we kind of got containers, we got serverless, we've got PaaS. We've got IaaS. It's like what you're seeing is almost a blending of this, and customers are saying, well, really, I want all of that together, right? I want the benefits of every single one of these different operating models into a singular thing, right? So kind of when you look at the kind of longer term kind of what's going on, we have to kind of pay attention to that as well, both from, obviously, what others are doing, as well as our customers. And that's really kind of the longer term roadmap comes into play, that multi-year view, and then bringing these two things together and synthesizing, what we're doing on a 6 month by 6 month semester basis to make sure we're doing the right things at the right time for, the right set of customers, right, to make sure everyone's successful. That's always challenging, right? That's the hard bit. Make it sound, it's easy to say, but you never have enough people or enough time or enough whatever, right? So
there's always a constraint. Absolutely.
There's always a constraint, yeah. But it's fun because we've seen such a positive reaction to what we're doing with the new runtime that the team's super motivated to just keep making it better and better. We just can't wait to kind of get this out into GA. The number of customers wanting to run production workloads on it, even during preview, really want to enable people together as soon as we can.
Yeah, super interesting. And how, just on that runtime piece, I know we're slightly backtracking, but how do you advise customers on sizing, an app service environment or something like that for what they've been traditionally doing in the native platform?
So we've actually started publishing a series of blog posts, which are actually written by the engineers in the team, and we have one specific to performance. And there'll be some others as well that will help with this costing, sizing, and other aspects of kind of using it, right? Not just its capabilities, but also how to actually productionize it. I actually need to check whether that one's gone out yet, but we are working on some docs essentially around that to make that easy for customers to size. So we've been doing obviously our own kind of capacity testing and various other things so that we can give guidance to customers, and we're doing that kind of one-to-one right now, and then using the learnings for that to put into the series of blog posts so that you can you can, as a customer, you can read that and equate that to what you're trying to do and size accordingly. So yeah, but as I mentioned, the benefits of cloud is really around the ability to kind of scale up and down as well, right? So what we're really looking at is like how you can size each unit of scale, right? What the capacity of that is, and then you can make a determination about how to set up auto scale to meet the peak loads of your scenario. So yeah, I'd say that's something we're working on right now. We will continue to publish more guidance on that as we work with more customers and more scenarios, so that we can be more accurate in providing guidance to help customers do that.
Fantastic.
Awesome. I think one final question from me, Jon, is how do you get new ideas? As in, obviously, we were just talking, backtracking again, sort of, or sidestepping from where Brian's just taken us back. But you obviously are juggling a load of items in terms of you've got on a roadmap and what you think are good ideas and how you invest time of developers and engineering. How do you get feedback from the community? User voice is obviously a place that we always point customers towards. Is that, speaking frankly, is that somewhere you actually get a lot of ideas from in terms of from the community? And obviously you're speaking to customers and you're getting tickets and other things. But where do you get the majority of your new innovative ideas from?
You have to get good at listening. It's as simple as that. So yeah, all of the above, right? All of our ideas come from our customers, honestly, right? And really what we do is listen to individual customers and obviously work closely with them, and then look across customers at similarities in what people are doing, and then figure out what investments we need to make to actually, kind of address those customer kind of concerns or opportunities that they've told us about. So really, it's as simple as that. I mean, it's like we don't have the answers. Like I can't tell you what Logic Apps is going to look like in 5 years' time. Our customers will do that with us, I hope, right? Because they're the ones who are using our products day in, day out, and they're the ones who kind of know, what's great, what needs to be better, right? To help us make better product. that's why we spend so much time kind of talking to customers and listening, and obviously doing things like this, because we really value the feedback. It sounds corny, but it's true. It's like we can't get enough kind of meetings with customers and the team to really understand what problems they're trying to solve, because every new problem a customer's trying to solve is just new information for us on whether we're doing a great job at helping them solve that problem.
Yeah, what a great answer. So there you go, people. Get it in user voice. John will look at it and he will prioritize.
Yeah, it's really
tell
great
us
to
what
hear
you
that.
think. Yeah, as always, just tell us what you think. Yep.
Well, John, kind of mindful of time, and thank you so much for spending the time with us this evening. It's been a great insight into how your team works, and thanks for sharing some of the new announcements that you've got upcoming. It's been really great to hear.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, and we'll get you back in about a year for another deep dive and update on what Logic Apps V3 looks like.
Awesome. Yeah.
Look
forward to it.
Hopefully face to face with a beer in hand as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.